This experience has made me wonder, how many things in your life do you protect, postpone, or overthink? Not because they matter so much, but because you have assigned meaning to it that it doesn't deserve. Hey, listener, welcome to episode number 76 of Listen Up. So, if you listened to last week's podcast, I talked about 3 practical strategies that you can implement in your life to establish a sense of order when you're feeling overwhelmed or chaotic or just too busy, or in misalignment with your life. So, one of the strategies that I talked about was reducing thinking energy. And I love the topic of thinking energy. If you go back to my very first podcast episode that I ever recorded, it was called Getting Out of the Trying Loop and Diving In. That episode was about thinking energy, and I've been talking about it ever since. This is a term I've coined because it's the best way for me to describe that process that we get stuck in the loop of our thoughts, or we get stuck in thinking errors instead of doing the things that we're supposed to do. So thinking energy is I see it a lot. I see it with my clients. I see it with myself. I see it with my family. It's just a very important topic to address. And I had something happen to me that I think perfectly illustrates the concept of thinking energy and what we can do about it. So I've got to share this story with you. To give you some context about this story, one of the things that I do in my business is that I host these Bliss in a Bottle vision casting workshops. Now, these workshops are intended to help you implement the Live with Intention framework of noticing, naming, and nurturing. And we do it in the bigger picture kind of scheme. So it's a vision casting. We go through the framework, but at the end, you get to do the fun vision board exercises of getting pictures and putting them on. I do it on a bottle. So if you're watching me on YouTube, you'll see the bottle that I did for myself. But it's just basically a glass bottle, and you can cover it with pictures, and it's very meaningful. And throughout the year, you can use the bottle as a vase for flowers, or you can use it as a penny jar, or you can use it to put little papers of gratitude, or your prayers, or anything you want, really. But the exercise involves this bottle. And when I do these workshops, I bring these bottles, I bring all the supplies. So I bring the bottles, the pictures, the magazines, all that kind of stuff. And then our clients they create their own bottle. All that to say, I had a lingering bottle in my house. Now, I don't know how this bottle got to my house. I hosted a vision casting workshop a couple of months ago, and then I don't know, that bottle spawned into my kitchen for reasons I cannot understand. But I walk into my kitchen one day, and on top of the counter, on the drying mat, is one of these glass bottles. Now, they don't have any pictures on it. It's just the glass bottle, and it's resting on the drying mat. Clearly, the bottle doesn't belong on top of the counter. Now, ever since I decluttered my home and remodeled my home, my designer made it a point to give me plenty of space in my kitchen so that every single thing had a home and my counters could be empty. Now, obviously, if you are washing dishes and you put them on the drying rack, at that moment, the counter will not be empty. But I do a really good job of putting everything away to try to maintain that pristine, clear countertop as much as humanly possible. So this bottle was clearly an eyesore. And typically, when I see something that's an eyesore, I handle it immediately. But for reasons that are unbeknownst to me, I just wasn't dealing with the bottle. I saw it. I knew it was there. I knew I had to do something with it, but I left it there. And I left it there for a day and then 2 days. And then I think it had been like 3 days and the bottle was just still there. And every time I came into the kitchen, I would see the bottle, know that I have to figure out what to do with the bottle, and then I would avoid it and then do something else. And then on the third or fourth day of that bottle just staring at me on top of this counter where it does not belong, I was doing the dishes. My husband was next to me talking to me. I was really trying to be present and engage in active listening of his story. So I'm rinsing out the dishes and I'm putting them in the dishwasher and I'm cleaning, but eyes on my husband, ears listening intently. I'm trying to get things done, but really engaging. And I find myself cleaning the countertops around the bottle, cleaning around the bottle. And then I realized that there was an area I had to dry, and the only way to dry it was to move the drying mat. So I ever so carefully grabbed this cotton drying mat that I have with the bottle on top, and I slide it over just a teensy bit so that I can dry the space. And the bottle tips over and shatters all over the floor, all over the countertops. Like just there is glass everywhere. It makes a huge mess. And in that moment, I looked at that bottle, at all that glass everywhere, and what I felt was relief. Relief. It was like a load off my shoulders that I no longer had to deal with the bottle that was an eyesore out of place on my kitchen counter. Does that make any sense at all whatsoever? Of course not. Why didn't I just move the bottle in the first place? It makes absolutely no sense. So I really started to think about this. Like, why did this happen? And what I noticed as I paid attention to it, was that I may have been giving that bottle more importance than it deserved. The first thing I noticed was I knew that I had to deal with the bottle. It didn't have a home already allocated to it because it was something new that was being introduced into my home. So whenever something new is introduced into a space that already has a home for things, you have to go through the process of finding a home for that thing. Now, that bottle isn't going to have a home in my home because it's not meant to be in my kitchen or to be used for anything other than these workshops. And the only one that I am going to keep is the one that I made for myself. So it was never going to have a home in my home. So that was the first problem. So then the next logical solution is to go to the garage and put it in the bag that I use for all of my inventory. I have a bag where I have my scissors and my materials and the magazines and all that kind of stuff. And in that bag, I have boxes where those bottles go, where those bottles belong. So I could have put it in there, except that I knew in my subconscious brain that there was no box for that bottle, because if there had been, I would have packed it in the box, but I had thrown the box away. So that bottle was probably loose from when I brought it home. And in my head, I probably thought it was not safe to put it back into the bag because it was fragile. So it needed a box, but I didn't have a box. So now that's another glitch in the plan. And then the third thing was, I tend not to be wasteful. So if I have, this is part of my inventory, it's a material that I've bought and paid for. So I guess in my brain, if I've bought and paid for it and it's part of my inventory, then I should use it. I shouldn't, just throw it away. That would be wasteful. And yet, I couldn't care less when it broke. Couldn't care less. I didn't even care that I had to pick it up with a broom and recogedor. How do I say that? I don't even know how to say a recogedor in English, but the thing to pick up the glass, right? How how crazy is that? I didn't care about that. That it was a relief for me. But I cared too much to throw it in the garbage if it didn't have a home in my home or it didn't have a home in my storage bag. I couldn't throw it out. It's absolutely ridiculous. But I was stuck in thinking energy. So I was stuck in a little loop that became thinking energy that I was avoiding and I didn't realize. But every time I saw it, it consumed a little bit more of me and it became a little heavier and a little heavier. And it was not blatant or obvious at the time because I thought I could ignore it, but I didn't realize how heavy it had become until I felt that deep sense of relief. So then that brings me to you. This experience has made me wonder, how many things in your life do you protect, postpone, or overthink? Not because they matter so much, but because you have assigned meaning to it that it doesn't deserve. Oftentimes, we give importance to things that don't require that much importance. Because we are subconsciously giving it importance, then we procrastinate making a decision on it. And that procrastination becomes thinking energy. And that thinking energy becomes one more loop that floats around open in our nervous system, creating unnecessary overwhelm, anxiety, stress, and that sense of heaviness that we have too many tabs open in our brain. What that made me realize, it's that the thing that we are procrastinating isn't what's weighing us down. It's the energy that we use in its avoidance. Pretty crazy, right? So this October, you know that I'm talking a lot about orderly October and creating order in your life. And last week, it was all about creating order amidst the chaos instead of waiting for the chaos to subside. This week, I want you to think about what order is. Order isn't about perfection. It isn't about pristine, spotless countertops. It isn't about a perfect calendar. It's about alignment. It's about intention. And it's about noticing what importance you are giving to things in your life and determining if they are carrying the weight they deserve. So here are 3 lessons that I have learned from that bottle incident in my kitchen. The number 1 is you needn't confuse cost with worth. Just because something has taken your time, your money, or your emotions doesn't mean that it has to stay in your life forever. A great example of this is reading books that you don't like. How many times have you opened up a book, started reading it, realized the book does not interest you, and you've gritted through that book and you keep pushing through and you keep pushing through because God forbid you don't finish a book that you've started to read. Instead of realizing there are so many incredible books to read in the world, why waste time on one you don't want to read? Put the book aside. Even if you pick it up later at a different time in your life, if you don't want to read the book, don't read it. Read something that inspires you, that educates you, that makes you want to finish the book. Another lesson I learned is it's easy to mistake holding on to things for being responsible. Letting go doesn't mean you're wasteful. It doesn't mean you're materialistic. It doesn't mean you don't care about things. It just means that you understand that this thing no longer has a place in your life. And oftentimes, those are material things, but other times it's dreams that no longer serve you. And sometimes it's the path that you're on. Maybe the job you have, or the career path you've chosen, or the home you live in, or the city you live in, or the friends you hang out with are no longer in alignment with your priorities, with your values, with the path that you want to be on, and you feel like you are careless or uncaring or irresponsible for abandoning that path or letting go. And sometimes that is the most responsible thing that you can do in your life. And lastly, we often procrastinate to avoid the emotions underlying the surface issue. Sometimes the things that you are clinging to are attached to identities you're not ready to let go of, things you're not ready to admit that you have outgrown, or things that you're not ready to admit you don't need anymore. So, in this orderly October, I invite you to notice what has been lingering in your life that is consuming your energy and has become thinking energy. What in your life is feeling like that bottle on the counter? It could be a conversation, a project, a book, or a thought loop that you keep revisiting over and over and over again. Number 2, once you've noticed that thing that is lingering in your brain, that open loop, I want you to ask yourself a clarifying question. If this disappeared tomorrow, would I be sad or would I be relieved? Would I be disappointed or relieved? And here's a pro tip. If you ask this question truthfully and you listen to your body will tell you the answer before your mind does. And the third lesson is nurture progress over perfection. Once you have identified the things that are lingering, how are you going to progress? How are you going to close that loop? One little tiny loop that you can close in your life will release some of that weight that is lying heavily on your shoulders. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do get to decide. And here's something that's kind of interesting. I find it incredible that in my case, that bottle breaking was a gift. It was the universe deciding for me and letting go of what I did not need to hang on to. And life does that for you sometimes. The universe will offer you gifts in the form of shattered glass, and it will remove from your life what no longer serves you. The problem is that sometimes you're not aware enough to realize that it's a gift in the first place. And you mourn what has been lost, even though deep down inside, it could be a relief. So that is something to pay attention to. Has the universe removed things in your life that you didn't have the courage or the decisiveness to remove on your own? And if that has happened, I want you to say a little thank you today for that. I want you to express a little gratitude for not having to make every decision on your own. Let's be grateful that sometimes the universe decides for us. That is a gift. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope this episode helps you realize that although chaos is a part of life and is probably inevitable, clutter is optional. And you most definitely can take responsibility in removing the physical, mental, and emotional clutter in your life. So I will end with this. Order begins when you stop protecting what is insignificant so that you may value what is sacred. Happy Sacred Sunday, and I will see you next week. That's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for being here. I am deeply, deeply grateful for this time to connect. If you're loving this podcast, I'd love if you could support me by subscribing, rating, and or leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Those reviews help us so much. And if you know of someone who could really use a voice like mine in their head, please share this with them and let them know how much you care about their bliss. Now, if you are feeling called to dig deeper and really work on elevating your mindset, wellness, and your relationships to create a healthier, happier, and more meaningful life, then I invite you to schedule a 60-minute complimentary consultation with me. Let's have a meaningful conversation and see if working together is in our future. You can find the link to the calendar of consults right there in my show notes, but you can also connect with me on my website, carolinedeposada.com, or just send me a DM on Instagram at Caroline de Posada. Like my friend always says, the project is big and you're a part of it. So thanks for being here.